You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Today we consider two common sense pieces of legislation. First, a bill that makes aliens inadmissible and removable if they drive drunk. And second, a resolution that condemns the Los Angeles riots. Now, the average Americans passing this bill and this resolution will be a no-brainer. Even in this polarized time, Democrats should be able to join. Yes, ma'am. Even in this polarized time, Democrats should be able to join Republicans unanimously and support reasonable legislation. After all, deporting dangerous criminals and condemning dangerous riots are rational, normal, and coherent steps this House should take. Unfortunately, I'm skeptical that we will see much agreement from my Democrat colleagues on these measures. Regardless, I am thankful to this committee for considering the Jeremy and Angel C. and Sergeant Brendan Mendoza Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act, a bill I introduced last Congress and again this Congress. Every 45 minutes, that is how often someone in the United States dies in a crash involving alcohol-impaired driving. In 2022 alone, there were 13,524 alcohol-impaired driving fatalities. In 2020, drunk drivers caused enough crashes that led to 400,000 injuries in this country. Those crashes don't discriminate. The victim could be me, it could be you, it could be anyone in our families or communities. This issue hits home to me, and there was a newlywed couple from my hometown in Enterprise, Alabama, named Angel and Jeremy C., and I knew this couple personally. Angel and Jeremy were riding a motorcycle together when out of nowhere, an illegal alien under the influence of alcohol collided into the newlyweds with his pickup. Their lives were cut short in this senseless act. Tragedies like this are not uncommon across our country. In December of 2023, an illegal alien killed a 46-year-old woman and her 16-year-old son in Bloomfield, Colorado, when he drove his truck up to 100 miles an hour and ran into the victim's vehicle, causing it then to crash into a tree. Despite having 5 previous DUI-related convictions, a Boulder County judge sentenced this illegal alien to probation and community service and work release on December 8, 2023, in relation to 2 of those convictions. Just 4 days later, the drunk driver crashed and killed the mother and her son. Or consider the case in Florida, where just earlier this year, an illegal alien from Mexico was arrested for his 3rd DUI after he hit and killed a kindergartner. In Texas, in December of 2024, an illegal alien killed a 7-year-old girl after he drove drunk, crashed into a car that's being driven by the girl's mother. Just months earlier, under the Biden-Harris administration, ICE had lifted a detainer which had previously been lodged against this illegal alien after he was arrested for assaulting a family member in June of 2024. H.R. 875 makes common sense changes to immigration laws to make an alien who is convicted or admits to drinking and driving under the influence inadmissible. It also makes an alien convicted of doing so removable. In fact, 59 Democrats voted in favor of this legislation when I brought it to the House and the floor last February. If you're a guest in this country, you drive drunk, you should be removed from our country, period. Drunk drivers are involved in 31% of all crashes that cause death in this country. On average, drunk driving killed roughly 11,000 people in the United States every year from 2012 to 2022. Yet current immigration law does not make aliens inadmissible or removable if they drive drunk and recklessly break our laws. H.R. 875 changes that and creates safer streets and safer communities for all of us. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Today, we're also considering House Resolution 516, led by my colleague, Representative Young Kim. This resolution condemns the violent riots in Los Angeles, California. For weeks, we have seen violence spread in the streets of Los Angeles and beyond. Individuals have engaged in arson, looting, personal property destruction, vandalism, and assault of law enforcement officers. Meanwhile, the hardworking men and women at ICE have ensured that dangerous criminal aliens are removed from Los Angeles streets. In one operation, in May, ICE arrested aliens convicted of manslaughter, aggravated rape of a minor, and assault with a deadly weapon. The week the Los Angeles riots began, ICE arrested aliens with convictions for murder, burglary, battery, DUI, sexual battery, and grand theft. Yet apparently, all of that is a bridge too far for the far left. Under their logic, immigration laws should only be ignored, not enforced. The resolution expresses gratitude to law enforcement, including the LAPD, local sheriff's offices, and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This resolution is another piece of legislation that I hope all members can get behind, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues on the Rules Committee. I've served on the committee for 6 years now, but it's the first time I've been on this side of the dais. So as we all know, in particular, bills typically only come before the Rules Committee when they can't garner a 2/3 of our members' votes on the House floor. So why don't these two Judiciary Committee bills have broad support across the whole House? Because they're legislative clickbait. They're designed to provoke heat, noise, and division, not a thoughtful policy discussion. Pretty succinctly, I'd sum them up as both missed opportunities and huge distractions. So first, let's talk about HR 875. The tragic fact is that we lose more than 11,000 people every year to crashes caused by drunk driving, and more than 1 million people are arrested every year for DUIs. The scourge of drunk driving is something that all of us want to stamp out once and for all, and we can take steps towards doing that at the federal level. We can support enforcement of laws on the books. We can put additional resources towards anti-drunk driving awareness and education. And we can support programs that work to end alcohol addiction. I know for a fact there's a bipartisan legislation out there ready to go. But those efforts haven't been moved under this majority. Instead, we're dealing with clickbait legislation. A few years ago, when Democrats led the House, we passed the Halt Drunk Driving Act that would provide more support for technology that could interface with vehicles and prevent drunk driving. That was signed into law as part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, even though almost every House Republican voted against it. Let's be clear. Anyone who commits a crime and endangers the public should be held accountable, and our existing laws reflect that. Serious DUI convictions are already grounds to deport or refuse admission to a non-citizen. Full stop. So this bill doesn't close any gap in existing law, and it doesn't make our country safer. It only weaponizes a problem to attack and scapegoat all immigrants. And it forgoes any nuance or circumstances which might call for a different result. I mean, as an example, just 3 months ago, the Speaker's own chief of staff was arrested for DUI when he crashed into a Capitol Police vehicle after President Trump's State of the Union address. Despite this incident, the Speaker said he has full faith and confidence in his staffer and believes he deserved a second chance. Yet he supports bringing this bill to the floor, which would deport a green card holder who may have lived here for decades for much less than that. In Arizona, sleeping in your car while drunk without even operating it or starting it can get you a misdemeanor DUI, and that would make someone deportable under this bill. Instead of confronting the dangers of drunk driving with serious public policy changes and resources, our Republican colleagues have brought us an unworkable proposal that doesn't address a very real problem on our roads, because the problem they're trying to solve is overwhelmingly about citizen drivers. I participated in the judiciary hearings that led to this bill being sent to the floor, and I carefully reviewed the majority report. There is absolutely no evidence in that hearing or report showing a causal connection between immigration status and drunk driving. And most notably, for all this talk, this legislation takes no real meaningful action to repair our broken immigration system. Now, HRes 516 presents similar problems. Instead of uniting people to condemn violence and draw the really important distinction between peaceful protest and lawless violence, our Republican colleagues have instead written up a largely fact-free and partisan resolution designed to score political points and sow division rather than reaffirming Central American values. So first of all, the people of Los Angeles, just like anywhere else in this country, have a right to peacefully protest government actions. Because in case anyone's forgotten, that is an American right enshrined in our First Amendment. And unbiased reporting has been clear that the recent protests in LA were limited in scope and overwhelmingly peaceful, despite what we've heard and what I'm sure we'll continue to hear. Any instances of actual criminal conduct that happened in the backdrop of these events were swiftly denounced by California's leaders, they were handled by local law enforcement, and they're being punished by the letter of the law. State and city officials took steps to keep people safe, and local law enforcement has been clear that they did not feel the need to request that Governor Newsom mobilize the National Guard. Instead, what we did see was this administration set out to provoke confrontation and cause chaos. They began by conducting aggressive, rush-hour ICE raids designed to garner maximum TV coverage, featuring masked and armed agents and armored vehicles, which they then used to snatch loved ones and friends from their jobs. And while they didn't see fit to provide notice to local law enforcement, they did provide advance notice to a TV personality, Dr. Phil, and it allowed him to embed with ICE both before and after the raids and get exclusive interviews with the border czar. So this was followed by deploying U.S. troops onto our country's streets, with the president's agents proclaiming that they'd arrest California's duly elected governor and announcing that they wanted to liberate Los Angeles, an American city. It's the stuff of dictators and authoritarians, not U.S. leaders. And it demonstrably inflamed tensions and made law enforcement's job harder. Let's be clear, we all condemn political violence, and those who cross the line from protected speech and protected protest to violence should be held accountable. But the administration and this resolution are misrepresenting the obvious difference between mass protest and isolated acts of violence in a shameless attempt to distract from what people were actually protesting about to begin with. Because it's clear that the people in Los Angeles and across the country don't believe that this administration's efforts to terrorize communities with menacing police actions are good for them or good for America. People took to the streets in Los Angeles and elsewhere to make their voices heard because they know that this type of menacing law enforcement does not make our communities safer. When masked agents grab not hardened criminals, but hardworking people with no criminal past from their workplaces and neighborhoods and schools, they know that it doesn't make us safer when government rips people away from their children and disappears them to gulags in El Salvador based on tattoos and mistaken identities and just plain mistakes. And they know that it doesn't make us safer when the president forcibly deploys the military on U.S. soil to engineer a politically charged visual display. And perhaps most Orwellian of all, it doesn't make us safer when people are grabbed when they appear in court to make their cases for why they are entitled under our law to be here legally. So no resolution is going to distract from that. With both these bills, it's clear that House Republicans want to hide behind manufactured anger and division. They know that they've done nothing to keep their campaign promises about driving down costs for families, making our country safer, or making people's lives better. In fact, it's the very opposite. The 6 months of this administration have been a train wreck, and the chaos continues every day at the expense of American families and our national security. So we know they don't want to talk about this, so we end up with these crazy bills in front of us. And obviously, I oppose them. My Democratic colleagues on the Judiciary Committee oppose them, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ms. Fishbach for her time of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just have a couple of comments, sincerely, and I appreciate you bringing these bills forward, Mr. Moore. And, first of all, DUI is a serious offense. It is serious, and my family has been touched twice by folks who have been under the influence, and there's been a car crash. So my family has been on the receiving end of that. So I appreciate that you brought that forward because it is a serious offense, and we need to deal with it. And if people are here as guests, we should not be tolerating it. And as for the resolution regarding this underlines the Republicans' support for law and order, and it's an important thing. You know, I'm from Minneapolis, or excuse me, I'm not from Minneapolis, from Minnesota, where we had the Minneapolis issues, and they've already done 32 million. Am I remember in California? Already done $32 million worth of damage in California. And we just have to make sure that we are supporting law and order because these aren't peaceful protests. These aren't mostly peaceful. These aren't people taking to the streets. They're taking to the streets to do damage. They're not just trying to have their voices heard. There are serious issues going on and serious damage and rioting. and that happened in Minneapolis, and now it's happening across the country. And so I appreciate you bringing this forward so that we can once again underline our support for law and order. So thank you very much, Mr. Moore, and I yield.
Gentlelady is back. Now recognize Ms. Leisure Fernandez for her time of questioning.
Thank you very much, and how nice to see each of you, and you look great on the other side of the table. So, you know, we've seen Trump's playbook before from all kinds of authoritarian and dictators across the globe and across the centuries. A nation reeling from economic hardship and trauma of a global crisis. A leader rises and claims he will take the country back to a glorified past. Instead of lowering grocery bills or raising wages, he finds a group to blame for all the economic problems. Over the years, over the centuries, we've seen the group be Christians or Jews or LGBTQ, and it changes who the group is, but not the playbook. We see sometimes a leader come in a democratic fashion and then demonize the press, undermine the court, silence dissent. We often see wasteful military parades, and often war. You know, Americans are upset at the cost of groceries, the way corporations have too much power, how the rich keep getting richer, and the regular folk struggle. They want to be able to afford to buy a home of their own, to get quality health care, and to see their children have a more prosperous future than they had. Rather than pursue bills to address the cost of living crisis or help Americans achieve that dream of prosperity, Trump and the MAGA Republicans have declared immigrants the cause of all of our problems. Republicans are falling over themselves to introduce and pass bills to show how hard they are on immigrants, even if those bills are just restatements of existing laws, like Representative Moore's bill. Seriously, we agree. Serious DUIs should be deportable offenses. Guess what? Serious DUIs are deportable offenses. When Republicans go home and your voters confront you about closing down rural hospitals, you can tell them, oh, but don't worry. Look at how I beat up on immigrants. I passed a bill to pass a law that is already a law. Democrats know the immigration system is broken, which is why we've introduced and we will empower numerous bipartisan immigration bills to address the need for agricultural workers, to provide dreamers a legal pathway, and to strengthen our security in our borders. We're not seeing the same on this end. And in fact, you raised it, Representative Scanlon, when you talked about the concerns about due process and the number of people who are being rounded up without any due process, including legal residents and citizens. Now, I don't sit on a judiciary bar or any of your judiciary colleagues concerned about this lack of due process.
Well, that's been an ongoing concern as we parse through these bills that target immigrants, that very often, actually in virtually every case, the conduct that is being targeted, at least in terms of public relations, are things that are already deportable offenses. The issue becomes whether or not there's due process engaged in terms of ascertaining, first of all, whether someone is a citizen or not, whether someone's legally here in the country or not, whether they are actually a criminal or not. That's what due process is about. Otherwise, we end up deporting citizens. We end up holding people liable for things that they didn't do.
Right. And I think everybody is in agreement that anybody who engages in criminal conduct, whether it's a protester, whether it's a citizen, or whether it's an immigrant, they need to face the consequences. And so going after criminal conduct is a fair thing to do. But Representative Moore, how many people detained by ICE under the Trump administration do not have a criminal background? You don't know? Well, according to the Cato Institute, as of June 14th, ICE had booked into detention 204,297 individuals. Of those bookings, 65%, 133,687 individuals had no criminal conviction. So we are not going after, right now, ICE is not going after criminals. As you pointed out, Representative Scanlon, they're picking them up when they're going in for their appointments. You don't show up at your appointment if you've been engaged in criminal activity. You are actually following the law, and they're being picked up. And, you know, I think that that's part of the problem. And the other part of the problem is the way, and this is why we have people protesting, which is a First Amendment right. Right? We had 12 million people protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights on the No Kings rallies. 12 million people. If they would have all been violent, we'd have no cities left. And they were protesting in Idaho, they were protesting in Utah, they were protesting in red states and blue states. But part of the problem is when you divert ICE's attention, is that you are diverting resources that should be going to attack and to address criminal conduct. One of the things I'm very concerned about is just that. Mr. Chair, I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record the article titled Exclusive, Thousands of Agents Diverted to Trump Immigration Crackdown. Oh, I am sorry. The source of that is Reuters.com. The Reuters, March 22nd, 2025.
All right. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you for the clarification. But from the article, it says the DEA, Drug Enforcement, whose roughly 10,000 staff had led the nation's efforts to battle drug cartels, has shifted about a quarter of its work to these immigration operations. That's a lot of people who should be going after drug lords and drug cartels and stopping the flow of fentanyl, picking up people when they go for their immigration hearings, picking up and raiding our fields where people are picking the food to serve us. That is not making our country more safe. It is putting us more at risk. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Ranking Member Scanlon?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. I may have looked surprised when the gentlelady mentioned a figure for damage in Los Angeles, and that was because I hadn't heard it, but we did look it up, and in fact, the figure that she cited was not for damage. It was the cost for pulling out law enforcement in order to address the protests that had occurred in Los Angeles, and the figure probably isn't surprising because the governor and mayor warned the president that if he were to call out the military, that it would inflame the situation and cause more protests, and in fact, that's what we saw. In the days after that happened, protests spiked. They have since receded. So the figure that was offered was not for damage to the city, but it was for the costs of law enforcement and cleanup associated with the protests. Figure that wasn't mentioned was the $139 million that it's costing to deploy the National Guard. And in fact, the National Guard have not been involved in controlling the protests. So yes, there are costs here, but they are not as represented. And that's, you know, all going to the fact that there was a plan in place for civil unrest in Los Angeles. They have used their plans many times before. They did not feel the need for it. And in fact, calling out the military here has added hundreds of millions of dollars of costs to the city.
So $134 million in order to have a performance of we are sending in the National Guard, we are militarizing our streets, which George Washington said was the last thing you should do is do not ever use our military against our own citizens. It's costing us $134 million, and I don't know if people have seen this, but a lot of those poor National Guard, they were just sleeping, right? They were sleeping on, like they were when they had to come here. The difference is, when they came here, there had been violent clashes, and our own Capitol Police had been beaten. And we needed the National Guard here. We called for them. We wanted them here. Real different in LA when they had sufficient force to handle everything.
Well, there's also the continuing cost, because the National Guard, these are folks from the community. Many of them are law enforcement agents elsewhere in the state of California, and the duties that they usually participate in there include things like managing wildfires, which of course California has been particularly afflicted with over the last year, and working on drug law enforcement at the border. So these folks were actually pulled off the border into performative roles in LA. So there's not just the cost of maintaining them in LA to essentially be a backdrop for media hits or something, but then there's the cost of them not being able to do the jobs that they would ordinarily do and pulling them out of their home communities.
Right, and, before I yield back, I just want to point out that it is the Republicans who refused to put up the plaque honoring the law enforcement officers who protected us on January 6th, even though it is the law. Republicans refused to honor the Capitol Police and other law enforcement officers who protected us from rioters and insurrectionists who were causing a lot of damage. We all lived through it. We should honor them. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I think the gentlelady now recognizes myself for time of questioning. Mr. Moore, we heard all kinds of things that don't think anything to do with 875, but that bill actually requires for deportation a conviction, so due process is all in place. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. And it requires that, actually, I have a concerning, it actually requires that the way the judge goes through the process, he uses the same laws NIA that they've used for years to determine if, in fact, it is a crime. And, of course, the DUI part of it is the conviction itself, right, the due process. And so they get a due process going through it, and so it's one of those where they just go through, and it's a normal court hearing. But if you look at it, it's 80 years the Board of Immigration and Appeals has provided additional protections for aliens who removability or inadmissibility is based on admission. So under the BIA precedent, to be considered an admission, an alien's admission must be explicit, unequivocal, and unqualified. Even then, the immigration judge would still have to find the admission fits within jurisdictions relevant to DUI and DUI-related statutes, and that the admission is based on reasonable, substantial, and probative evidence. And so it should not be so difficult to remove a foreign national drunk driver from the U.S. to ensure that they cannot enter the U.S. in the first place. This contradiction kind of it's really fear-mongering. It contradicts the law, it contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that the aliens who drive drunk can be removed from the United States. So they get a normal due process.
Can I just add, they don't require a conviction, though, for the
Admissibility.
inadmissibility. Yeah.
Right. For admission into the country, it can be based on an admission of facts that would, taken on the admission of facts, equal to driving under the influence charge. But for deportability, which is what I asked about, it is a conviction. All right. I appreciate that. With that said, I will. Oh, sure. I'll yield you some time.
Okay,
Sure.
were you done? I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to respond a little bit. Yes, I talked about 32 million, but as I, just spend a couple of minutes on the internet, they actually estimated at potentially over 52 billion. Because they're talking about the property damage, they're talking about the cleanup. But, I think that the 2,000 buildings that were damaged by fire are significant. The 23, now this, I can imagine there was probably more, but at least 23 businesses that were looted and potentially burned. So, so we can argue over the numbers, but the fact is that there's serious issues going on. And I think probably those 23 business owners that were being looted, or at least 23, were probably appreciative of the fact that additional law enforcement and members of the military were sent in to stop that kind of thing, so maybe it stopped at 23 instead of 123. So I just wanted to point that out, that yes, maybe we had numbers wrong, but the property damage is significant.
And I
yield
think the
back.
gentlelady also was concerned, or perhaps included in that number, were all the businesses that had to shut down because of the disruption in that part of the city.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
All
Chair.
right. With that, I yield back and now recognize the gentleman.
I'm sure that everything has already been asked, so I'll yield back. I've got very few questions. Barry, Congressman Moore, thank you for putting this up. You know, what you hear back and forth from my good friends on the other side, I don't know if pictures lie or not. Burning cars have a price, broken windows have a price, breaking and looting buildings, businesses have a price. That doesn't lie. And to say that it does is peaceful protest, it's just not true. Then pictures don't tell a different story. It's a shame we have to have this. Los Angeles do not have a strict punishment or consequences for it, and that's why you have all this. To think that you send in police and it inflames people is really laughable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it was sending in the military that inflamed people. It wasn't the police.
Inflames the people. Send in the military to keep order from buildings being burned, from people, ICE officers getting beat up,
You think
from
people
businesses
of
getting
Rock Hill
looted.
would enjoy
That's
it if the
ama-
military hit the streets
Can I
of
just
your
finish?
hometown?
Can I just finish? Then I'll let you, I'm not going to interrupt
It
you.
is the gentleman's time.
I'll be glad to, but they can't, no one can hear, maybe they don't want to listen, but to say that police, National Guard, military being caught in flames, and that's why they tear up buildings, loot buildings, break windows, tear up cars. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, what are you saying?
I'm saying that as the governor and the mayor indicated, they were capable of handling whatever looting or whatever had happened in connection with these ICE raids, but that the announcement that the president was going to send in the military did inflame folks and caused more protests. And if people do things that are out of hand when they come in and protest, then their police were able to handle it. But the issue was that the president exacerbated the situation here. It's basically a 10th Amendment question. I mean, going back to the founding of our country, police power is reserved to our states and to our local agencies, and people don't take it well if someone tries to impose the military on their streets.
I think the governor's record is pretty clear on the free-for-all that he allows in California. How that man stays in office, I have no idea. He has, unfortunately. Unfortunately for the people of California. Mr. Moore, you have any comments on?
You know, sir, I saw the videos you saw, the police officers, the cinder blocks through the windows, the police officers being hit with cinder blocks. They needed backup. And I think that to restore order, a lot of the flags I saw were not American flags being waved in California. And so I think the president acted duly. He brought in the National Guard, and he got the situation under control. The figure I saw was $20 million on damages, but we saw immigrants who actually had businesses who were being knocked down, their businesses being raided, and so the cost of that, the loss of business, the revenue to that community is going to be, and all that, the security issues. Just people will be afraid to go to those areas until order is restored. So I think the president did the right thing.
He absolutely did the right thing. And police officers can't patrol. This didn't go over. The looters didn't just do this for 10, 11 hours. They did it days. And the only reason the governor did not want help, he hates Donald Trump so much. Donald Trump helped out the people when a governor does not. And does
You
not
remember
do
President Trump reached out and asked him to get it under control, and then Newsom denied he ever made the call. And so I think President Trump reacted the way he had to, and it just restored order to the community. His job is to protect the people, and sometimes that requires the National Guard.
And to say the costs were associated with the National Guard and not with the damage and the looting went on defies any type of logic that I've ever witnessed. Anyway, thank you for putting this
Yes, sir.
up.
Now recognize
Just
the
briefly.
gentleman from, the ranking member,
Massachusetts,
Massachusetts, gentleman from Massachusetts for a
Yeah, just
couple of
briefly, I wish the president had done the right thing on January 6th. I was here that day. I don't know if you saw the videotapes of what happened that day. I didn't know if you want to see pictures of broken windows and destroyed property. And when all is said and done, not only did the president not do the right thing, but when he got the chance, he pardoned everybody. And you talk about flags that were being waved, there were Confederate flags being waved that day. No one seemed to have any problem with that. And so and we can't even get the Speaker of the House to hang the plaque that Congress voted on to honor the men and women of the police force, not only of the Capitol, but all the area police forces who actually protected us that day. So I find this kind of selective outrage, a little bit startling. All of us condemn violence wherever it occurs, and looting and any kind of illegal activity. I think the issue in California was that the area of protest was contained. There were far more people protesting peacefully than violently, and so I find this selective outrage and nobody has said a word about the pardoning of all those who did destruction to this building and who beat up our police. Yeah, if you want to ask.
Mr. Scaven, I think if I remember correctly, President Trump offered to bring the guard, and Pelosi turned him down,
Well,
right?
he didn't, and so he did not. I mean, we all know that. That's the new spin.
Well, that's what
But
we
did
were
President
told.
Trump pardon everybody?
I guess he did.
Yes, he did.
I
don't
think
know.
he did.
I could give you the news articles if you don't know. He did. People who violently attacked men and women of law enforcement up here, who were protecting the lives of every member that was serving then and all the staff up here. Yeah, he pardoned every one of them.
Will you yield, Mr.
I'm
McGovern?
happy to yield to the gentleman so he can defend the indefensible.
Gentleman yields to the gentleman,
Good luck, Ralph.
Are you denying, are you,
North Carolina.
pardon me?
I yielded to you, he
I
yielded to you.
yielded to you.
Okay. Are you denying that President Trump is on record that he called for the National Guard, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let him come in?
That.
That's not selective outrage,
That's
Mr.
not what
Governor.
happened. But are you denying that the President Trump pardoned every single one of these people that came up here and violently attacked law enforcement?
If you want to get into pardons, let's get into your President McGovern, your
Can I
President.
just ask you one other question? Who's in charge of the National Guard? Nancy Pelosi or the President of the United States? The President of the United States overrode the governor in California and sent in the National Guard. So the idea that you're blaming Nancy Pelosi, this rewriting of history is absurd. It's a way to cover up what, this
You
terrible.
can't cover up the facts, Mr.
No,
McGovern.
and the facts are that this Capitol was violently attacked
All right.
by a bunch of insurrectionists, and the President
Time
pardoned every
belongs-
single one of them.
Time belongs to the ranking member at this moment. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, the hypocrisy here is stunning to me. I yield back.
Can I say one
Gentleman.
last thing?
Gentleman has yielded back. I'm now going to recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack. He might yield you some time.
Yeah, of course, I'll yield to you, Mr. Norman, please.
Thank you, Ms. Jack. I'll just say what was televised for I don't know how many weeks, Mr. McGovern, when Nancy Pelosi wouldn't get cross-examined. She wouldn't call the Sergeant of Arms up. She kicked Jim Jordan, and I think.
And when was she in charge of the National Guard?
I'm talking about the trial. I'm talking about, you can say President didn't ask for the National
President
Guard
didn't
in,
do a damn
But on the
thing
trial,
to help
no,
us.
y'all hate, look,
pardoned them all.
President Trump asked, it would have been avoided, he would have had the people there and stopped all of that, had it happened. It didn't happen. On the trial that was a charade, they to kick off all the Republicans, Jim Jordan and I forget one other one, Jim Banks. It was a sham trial. And why didn't Nancy Pelosi have to testify? Why didn't the Sergeant of Arms have to testify? It was a sham because they hate Donald Trump so bad.
What trial?
Those are questions that need to be asked
I
by
yield
the
back.
chair. We're trying not to have debate between the various members. And I don't have the answer to those questions, and it's Mr. Jack's time.
And maybe we
Mr.
could
Jack
submit
wants to yield-
a written request that maybe we could ask why Donald Trump didn't testify.
Okay.
It-
Well,
Mr. Jack?
I will, I just want to ask Mr. Moore one question before I yield back, and obviously welcome any conversation as it relates to this bill. Specifically, Mr. Moore, I understand that over the course of a 10-year period, I believe this bill will actually be a cost saver for our government. It'll save about $500,000 estimate. Wanted to see if you had any comment on that.
I don't have the cost savings in front of me, Mr. Jack, but I'm happy to get that to you.
Wonderful. If you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that this bill will save about $500,000. That's, yes, sir.
Brian, I think it'll save a lot of lives. Many of these cases are released 4 or 5 times, like, Jeremy see in my district where he was killed. And time again, we see these, they'll downgrade these charges sometimes if we're not careful and call it reckless driving. But the folks are back out on the street. In many cases, Mothers Against Drunk Driving says you've driven at least a dozen times drunk. And so they will a lot of times be deported or removed after they kill somebody, but at that point, it's too late for our communities and our families.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moore and Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Jack yields back, and that concludes our questioning. We appreciate the witnesses being here, and thank you so much for your testimony today.